Countdown. Hey, everybody out there, welcome. Tonight is actually so cool. When Kenny got a hold of me about talking to Cowann, it's like, I really am interested in this book because it's not your wrestling autobiography style book. Cowann, where did this idea come from? I'm going to put up the title too while we're talking.
All right. So it came from a lot of different places. I appreciate you asking that, Rob, and I appreciate you having me on here. So the book is Cooking Up Counseling, a Recipe for Peace in Unsavory Times. I started writing this book 2 years ago, a little bit over two. I actually finished it. It was one day under the 2 year anniversary. I didn't even realize it, but it came from the pandemic. Actually, my inspiration to write the book was I just watched Hamilton. I don't know if you've seen Hamilton.
I have not. I want to. I just haven't found the time to sit down and watch.
Well, I'll tell you the crux of it. Like, my book has nothing to do with Hamilton at all, but the Lin-Manuel Miranda and like the story behind that play. It was just very full of inspiration. Like, I'm not throwing away my shot. I'm not throwing away my shot. Like, all these songs, like talking about why does he write? Like, he's running out of time. Like, it was just like, man, it's Alexander Hamilton, dude. Like, I'm not necessarily saying he's like a role model or inspiration or anything like that, but the story itself inspired me to realize that if you want to achieve a dream, it's so important. And I'd always wanted to write a book. It was kind of like a bucket list thing of mine. My mom, who passed away, about 7, 8 years ago now, her big thing was she wanted to write a book. So I always said, look, that was one way that I could honor her. Her legacy was if I can finish a book on her behalf, and that's kind of like letting her live vicariously through me. So the book, let me start off with, I'm an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, which is just a fancy pants way of saying that I'm a therapist. So when I'm not body slamming fools in the ring, I'm actually sitting down face to face with them, helping them out with their problems. So of course, we all remember and would like to forget 2020, the year that everybody wanted to hit fast forward on,
The blip.
The blip. Yeah. The big asterisks on the cheat sheets, right? So 2020, the year that COVID started kicking our ass. So during the height of the pandemic, of course, there was all this racial unrest, protests in the streets, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, all this stuff. People were anxious, people were depressed, people were isolated, people were separated from their loved ones, and people weren't doing so good, which for me, in an awful way, meant that business was booming. It meant that there was a lot more people than ever that needed my services, but I'm only one person. I'm one people. I'm only one person, so I can't help every. There we go. We were just talking about syllables, we're just talking about that a second ago. Now I can't get my plurality together, but I can't help everybody, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I realized that although there were a lot more people coming into my office for help, there was still so many people out in the world, and you could tell just from getting on Facebook for 5 minutes, that still needed help, that were still feeling anxious, that were still feeling lonely, that were still feeling overwhelmed, that were still feeling depressed, that were still full of anger and frustration and rage and confusion, not knowing what to do. So I realized that people need therapy. And as a therapist, as a social worker, it was incumbent upon me to be able to help people to understand, like, number one, what the hell is therapy? Is that magic voodoo witch stuff? Like, there's so many stigmas about it. So I wanted to demystify and debunk the stigmas of therapy, because everybody thinks that's not for me, that's for the crazy people. And I want to tell you that everybody at some point in life can and will benefit from therapy if given, if they're able to put their pride aside and do it. So the purpose of this book, Cooking Up Counseling, a Recipe for Peace in Unsavory Times, is to be able to help people to understand, like, what is therapy, when might I go to it? What does it look like? What happens during the process? How do I find a good therapist? What's the point of it? What are some things that might bring me into it? And the reason why I use the cooking up metaphor, like people to this day are like, oh man, Zoe, I can't wait to read your cookbook. I love cooking. I love food. And the thing is, this would be like the biggest cookbook in, it's
Right.
doing, what, 253 pages, right? Um, so although there are recipes in here, because I didn't want to, to give anybody the okey doke, like, oh man, this book doesn't have any cooking in it. Like I have some actual recipes in this book from friends and family, like some homemade recipes. But I use cooking up counseling because I was thinking about, that chicken noodle for the teenage soul and chicken noodle for the soul and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Like that series, like just resonated with so many people. Like during, I'm guessing we're probably not too far in age, but like a lot of people, like during my generation were growing up, like looking at that book as a way for peace and comfort. So thinking about comfort food, right? That's the one common denominator that everybody has in common. Even if you're on a feeding tube, everybody literally eats, right? You can't survive if you don't do it. So food, regardless of what type of food it is, and cooking is just something people always think about comfort food. And when I was little, I used to eat this and my grandma would make this and my mom's recipe for this. So I wanted to be able to use, I realized in the therapy setting, I use a lot of cooking and food metaphors and analogies. So I realized, man, I might as well just put all this stuff in a book. I'm saying it over and over and over and over and over, in sessions. Let me put all this in a book so that the people, to my point earlier, I'm not able to be everybody's therapist, but for my past clients, for my current clients, for people that will never be my clients, they'll have an idea of what goes on in Big Zoe Cowann Owens' head. When I'm no longer around, people will be able to say, this is what this guy's thought processes were. March 27, 2020, I was walking across the street and I got hit by a car, and I got carted off in an ambulance, to the hospital, like in the height of the pandemic. Nobody wants to go to the hospital during the pandemic because that's where COVID lives, right? So I was more scared about that than actually of course, I'm thinking, wow, that hurt, of course. Took out my legs, but my instinct was I wanted to get up and chase the person down. And I realized actually my friend was there with me, who's a nurse, and she advised me, hey, I know you're mad, but you probably don't need to stand up right now. And I don't know if I could have if I wanted to. But it let me realize that although that wasn't a life-threatening injury that I sustained, ended up torn labrum, torn rotator cuff, a lot of contusions and bruises on my knees. But it let me know how, even when you're careful, even when you feel like you're doing all the right things, just like that, your life can be threatened. So I thought, I didn't hit my head. So I can still work. I can still make a living. And I think my legs will heal up. But I said, there's going to come a time when I'm not going to be here to be able to tell my story. There's going to come a time when I'm not able to help people. There's going to come a time when I'm not going to be able to be people's therapist. There's going to be a time when I'm not going to be able to run my mouth on a podcast or an interview like this opportunity you're giving me right now. So the book came from a place of wanting to be able to solidify my legacy, to be able to let people know what's going on in my head, but also more importantly, to encourage people to prioritize your mental health. Like we're always talking about health, but mental health is like the redheaded stepchild. Like, oh, well, it's for crazy people, but it's literally for anybody who has a brain, which is everybody, right? And I'm going to shut up because I'm sure you probably have some questions. I've ran my mouth for like 8 minutes straight.
Oh, no. Trust me. This is so interesting because you're right. Everybody in a normal day can use counseling, whether they want to admit it or not, just to help keep their thoughts straight and on track. So you throw a pandemic on top of that, then the fact that you're trapped in a house. Sometimes, like myself, I was trapped in a basement. So literally, I didn't see the sun for a couple months,
Right.
This sounds like the best thing to come out of that.
Yeah.
And let's say this book, one person came up and said, okay, I don't have time to read it. What in a nutshell can I take from? Is there one piece of advice in that book that you think everybody should know?
I think that everybody should know that perfection is not possible. I think that we constantly, as Americans, and maybe there's some non-Americans watching this too, but culturally, There's culture. Yeah, and that's fair. Uh, so culturally, there's this tendency to think that intensity trumps consistency. Like when we're trying to make goals and we're trying to do things better. And this isn't a unique idea to me. This is actually, I think James Clear might have said it on a Brene Brown podcast. But I'm a big fan of hers. So you'll see a lot of Brene Brown and Mel Robbins and some of my other heroes in here that I've cited correctly, hopefully. Um, but we're so focused on perfectionism that we sometimes don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We don't allow ourselves to take the armor off, to take the shield off. We're always wearing we're the knight in shining armor, and we're constantly aspiring to perfection as opposed to improvement. We worry about being right instead of trying to get it right. And I think if we live in our life as like the goal of living, like the point of life is, what can I do to make today a little bit better than yesterday? What can I do to make tomorrow a little bit better than today? It's like walking up steps, right? Like eating an elephant one bite at a time. If you look at how big and how overwhelming the elephant is, you're never even going to pick up a fork. It's impossible. I can't do that. If you just hunker down and you start taking them one bite at a time, you can do that. And I think that's the attitude that I want people to take from mental health, that there's not a magic wand to where we can just fix people's problems. But the process is being able to get out of your own way, being able to learn who you are, what are your values, what are your goals, what are your strengths, what are the things that have gotten you this far in life. Because even if you're not living the life that you have now, like the point is to have a life worth living. So always finding, some value in whatever it is that you're doing and making the most out of it. So I know that was a really long one thing.
But
I think
that's perfect.
yeah,
You are 100% right. There are so many people I know in life that are almost perfectionists, and they're thinking if I don't get it right, it's not worth doing.
sure.
So no, that's brilliant. I do have to ask though, because I know what it's like to write um, stories and
Right.
fiction. How do you decide in a book like this what you're going to put in? Because I'm assuming that book that you have is not your knowledge; it's what you've chosen to put in there. So
Yeah.
how do you decide what goes in and what doesn't?
So that's a really good question, Rob. And I guess I wanted to put as much of what I thought would be relevant to therapy, mental health, as far as the most basic premise of it in here. Like, I wanted this to be mental health 101. So I wanted to make it accessible, which is just a way of saying, as opposed to going into a doctoral level thesis, dissertation type of thing that only other clinicians are going to be able to understand. I wanted to make this something that the common person could pick up and say, all right, I'm a regular Joe. What is it that I'm going to need to know about therapy? So I use these food and these cooking metaphors to make it as accessible and easy to understand as possible. So I kind of took a Google Doc and I wrote down a list of ideas. I think what I started with, and I kind of did it simultaneously, I wrote a list of food metaphors, analogies, and different plays on words that I find myself commonly using in therapy sessions that I thought could be relevant to a book.
Yeah.
Because I thought that sticking with the theme was really important to me. Like, it would just be fun and unique to make this book stand out. Because I mean, I'm sure there's a billion books about mental health and therapy. I don't think there's any other books, to my knowledge, about using food metaphors to describe the process. And if there are, whatever. I didn't steal the idea
Not
from
as
them.
good
I
as this
promise
one.
that. Probably not. And I'm a very humble person, but I'm going to say this is a damn good book. I've been really humble and not trying to toot my own horn. But I think at this point, I need people to recognize that what this is the opportunity to potentially change somebody's life. So whether it's your own life from reading this or a friend, a family member's, and I hope and think that possibly this book could save a life. So when I thought about what do I put in it, I said, well, let's start off with what is therapy? Let me describe that. What are the most common themes that bring people into therapy? Let's discuss that. Okay, what are diagnoses? What are some of the mental health challenges? What's some of the jargon, the mental health jargon that turns people away, that makes it, that's like, sometimes therapists like to use to make themselves sound a little bit smarter than they are. to almost separate themselves from the clients. Like, I want to have an alignment and pull clients in to recognize that you're the only expert in the room. I'm a professional. I've been doing this for over a decade, but you're the only person who's the expert in your life. You're the only person who's quite literally walked in your own shoes, lived in your own skin for as long as you've been alive. So that makes the client the expert. So helping to get out of our own ways and recognizing that that's who the expert is. Helping people to understand what's the process, what goes through the therapist's mind, being able to be humble and vulnerable, recognize the importance of connection, helping people to understand what coping skills are, what are potential stressors. So I just went through the myriad of things that I could think of that might be reasons to stop people from engaging in therapy. What might be some reasons that might make people want to do therapy? What are some things that might give people trepidation when making the decision on, should I do it? Should I not do it? You know, should I stay or should I go? That kind of thing. So that's what I wanted to put in the book. Everything I could think of that would be at least the most basic information to help people decide if therapy is right for them or not. And even if it's not, what can I do to improve my life? Period, point blank.
That's awesome. Kenny's watching, Kenny Casanova. He said, Stan Lee, I believe, once said, it's better to put out a good book than to try and perfect it and never get it out.
Yep, absolutely. And Brene Brown, who is, again, I mentioned her before, she's like a fellow social worker who has a bachelor's, master's, and a PhD in social work. She talks about SFDs. I don't know, is this very family friendly or can I talk?
Oh, yep, you're wide open here.
Okay, so SFDs, if we're keeping it family friendly, stormy first drafts, or what she actually says was shitty first drafts, because so often we get stuck and fixated on, you know, just trying to be perfectionists, you know, trying to make sure that this is going to be perfect. And I realized that if I did that, then I would never put out the product. What I did was I took somebody smarter than myself, my wife, my sister. They helped me to edit it, especially my wife put hours and hours and hours and hours into reading this thing to where I think she could probably be a therapist now because she's read this book more than I have. But as far as really helping me to, like, I know my jargon and I understand what I'm trying to say, but and she knows me very well, but she's like, Cowann, what are you trying to say here? What does this mean? You know, from a non-clinician standpoint, this is how I would take this, but what are you trying to say? So being able to hold me accountable so that I could just quickly put down that shitty first draft, and then she could kind of help me to mold it into something that's more digestible. See what I did there?
Nice.
More palatable, something more tasty, more appealing to the taste buds. In the book, full of dad jokes and punnies and analogies, just like that. Like, it's you get, after a while, I was like getting burnt out of, oh God, how many more of these can I do? And it turned out I could do 258 or 253. How many pages are in my book? I don't know how many pages. 258 pages worth was the answer. And toward the end, I had to apologize. I'm like, man, if you've stuck with this book to this point, you know, I know it's been really corny and kind of cheesy, you know, but it was fun. I mean, it was a real labor of love. So I appreciate that.
That's the important part, is to be able to relate to the words, you know. And I think it's great to do the cooking analogies because, like you said, everybody has that home comfort meal, you know, sitting at grandma's table with the chicken and the dressing, and you know, that is comfort. So start there, and then to make sure, like you said, the jargon is there, because I've read so many self-help books that have language in there, like you mentioned before, that is clinical, that, you know, I need another book to decipher the book I'm reading.
Right.
So that's why I think this is brilliant on all those levels.
Well, I appreciate that. I try to make sure we had a little bit of everything in here for people. I also, in addition, I don't think I have any with me. Oh, I do have one. So there's, my wife is really creative about doing like journals and stuff. So we decided to have these companion journals. This one is, they're cleverly named after the chapters. So this one is based off of one of the chapters, Serenity Soup. Then we have one based off of Struggle Stew, and one based off of Saying Grace. So all of these journals, there's 3 different ones in them. The first page, and I know you can't see all this, but each of them, they're 3 separate journals, and they all kind of have some I guess, some writing prompts to help people as far as if you want to use this as an accompaniment for the book to support it. So like, for instance, this one, it says coping skills or strategies that we can implement as a safety raft to navigate turbulent waters. These are actions you can perform to help you get grounded, shift focus, distract negativity, focus on positivity, process feelings, gain insight, and regulate your physical state. I'm going to say a few more things, but then some prompts as far as things that you might actually use, like questions to help you, like, what do I journal? Because some people are like, I don't know how to journal. Then it's just asking some questions. Did you talk to someone you trust today? What did you do for fun? What gave you inspiration today? Did you work toward a goal that you want to reach? How did you intentionally move your body and exercise? What made you smile and laugh today? And there's like a ton more just to kind of get the wheels turning. So this one is Serenity Soup, and it's just kind of a processing journal. I have one, it's a gratitude journal where you start thinking about what are some things I'm grateful for today, and it has some prompts to help you think of those lines. And then another one, Struggle Stew, what are some things that were really challenging today and some difficult things that I need to work on overcoming and having some goal setting. So those are also available if you get the book is on Amazon, but those journals are also available. It's kind of a way of supplementing it to have some material to beef up the book, right?
You've been studying this.
Right, man.
I think that's great, especially the gratitude one, because I think that's one thing that people don't do enough of in their own life is think about the things that they're actually thankful for, things that are good going on. They're always focused on that one bad thing.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that is cool. And it prompts you to think more about, like you said, what's good, what challenged me today, or who I spoke to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I absolutely adore how you have this set up, because I think this is great. It's very, I'm going to use the word humanizing, as opposed to, because I've read a couple and they were definitely clinical books.
Right.
And that will turn people off so fast.
Yeah. Well, if I can get slightly clinical for a second, what you're talking about as far as like the gratitude journal thing, there's a part of the brain, and I discussed this in the book. So give you a little spoiler for those if you're thinking about checking it out. And I break this down in a very human, straightforward kind of way. But there's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system that's a filter system. And we all have it. We all have prejudices. Our brains have been programmed to look at and view the world from a certain standpoint, based off of what people have said to us, how we view ourselves, the messages that we've received. We all have confirmation bias. We love to take in information we agree with. So based off of the way that our reticular activating system is programmed, it might be more pessimistic. It might be more optimistic. You might be more, if you're more pessimistic, then to your point, Rob, you might be looking for validation to confirm all of the crappy negative things that are going on. If you're more optimistic, you might be more likely to look for the positive good things. So the challenge I give is I'm like, Rob, look around the room you're in. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds, count all the green things you find. And then after you're counting, then 30 seconds later, I say, all right, how many yellow things did you see? You're going to be like, I don't know, dude. I counted 27 green things and there's yellow there and there's yellow there, but I wasn't counting them because your brain was focused and fixated on counting the green things, right?
Dang. Yeah. Okay.
If your reticular activating system is programmed and fixated on looking for all the negativity, the way that the world works is there's a 100% guarantee that something bad's going to happen. And there's also a 100% guarantee that something good's going to happen. And what you choose to fixate and focus on is based off of how your reticular activating system's programmed. I talk in the book. This is something from Mel Robbins. She has a great book, great video on this. I have QR codes to several videos, including some from Brene, some from Mel, and different people. There's actual QR codes in the book for videos that I reference, so that you can look at them as kind of supplementary resources to help you to understand what it is I'm talking about. But she talks about how we can use visualization to reprogram our negative thought distortions. So that's one way of how therapy and working with a therapist can help you to shift your thoughts processes and help you to understand what your thoughts are. I use CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, helping people understand the relationship between their thoughts, their feelings, their actions. Also, MI, motivational interviewing, helping you understand what are your values, what are your strengths, what are your goals, and how you can use all that awesomeness to overcome whatever challenges you're facing. Because sometimes, do you play video games, Rob?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So think about a first-person shooter. Like, we all see things in the first-person perspective. So, like, I see literally what's in front of me. I see my hands and, whatever I'm holding. but I don't see what's behind me. I don't see what's next to me. Sometimes you need somebody to hold the mirror up for you so you can see the things that you're not paying attention to. Sometimes you need somebody to say, check your six. Sometimes you need somebody to point out some things that you're not focusing on. But it doesn't mean they're not there. So that's where a clinician, a therapist, a counselor, a good friend, but being able to understand the need for not just muddling through life, but also taking some self-evaluation and seeing, am I where I need to be, or what do I need to do to get to the next level?
I also find it fascinating how a lot of the stuff like in this and the things that we study have been around for years in different cultures.
Sure.
Because just the fact, like you said, if you're pessimistic, you're looking more negative. That falls back being Aboriginal. There's a story I was always told about the two wolves, one for evil and one for good.
That's in here.
Yeah, the Chinese have it too with their yin and yang. Like it's everywhere, but you don't realize it until you focus.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
brilliant.
Well, I
So
appreciate that.
now I have to ask, because this is such a strange combination of a wrestler and a counselor.
Right.
How do you reconcile that with you? Like, what made you decide to either A, get into wrestling and then counseling, or vice versa?
Well, I mean, it's the funny thing is that I wrestle for the exact same reason that I'm a therapist, right? And people are like, how does that work? It's like the exact opposite thing, right? One, you beat people up and make them feel bad. The other, you sit across people and make them feel good. But if you consider what a pro wrestler, what a professional wrestler does, my job is an entertainer, as WWE refers to them as sports entertainers, right? As superstars. So as a sports entertainer, as a professional wrestler, my job is to be able to help people to feel. Same thing as a therapist. So if you pay your hard-earned money to come watch Big Zo wrestle in a wrestling ring, then the intention is that you're going to want to suspend your disbelief, to put all of your troubles, all of your stressors, all the BS in your life behind you. So for a couple of hours, you can just sit there and enjoy something in front of you, enjoy a production, enjoy a show. So if I'm a good guy, then maybe you want to use your energy to invest into me. So you want to cheer for me. You want to cheer me on. You want to say, slam them again. And mind you, pro wrestling is the only place where you can actually interact, and the people that you're interacting with will actually do something different. You can go to the movies and yell at the silver screen all day. They're not going to do anything different. You can go to a basketball game or a football game, and they're going to do whatever the play was called. If you go to a wrestling match and you tell me, if I'm a good guy, you say, slam them again, I might say, all right, this one's for you, Billy. Boom. Or if I'm a bad guy, my job is to have you to hate me. So either way, not for the sake of hating me, but for the sake of loving the good guy, the whole superhero, supervillain story, right? So
you can't
my
have a
job,
good hero without a bad villain.
Absolutely. If there's not a good story, if there's not a good reason to cheer or to boo, then what is the purpose? We're just watching, half-naked, sweaty men slap each other around. Like, what's it's kind of weird.
When you put it
some
that
people
way.
are into that, But if there's a story, if there's a reason, if there's a purpose, if there's an intent, then now I'm invested. But more importantly, I have a reason to come back next week, and I have a reason to come back another week. Now I'm starting to sound like Al Snow, who is my, kind of my hero. He owns OVW, where I wrestle at primarily, and this is like the kind of stuff that he talks about all the time. But long story short, I've already made the long story long, but trying to synthesizing it. The point is that I wrestle because it makes people in the crowd and fans feel better. Because I know me growing up as a kid, I grew up in the Attitude Era. I would switch back and forth between WCW and WWF. And I love that. So I wanted to be that. So I decided at a very young age, I want to wrestle. So I would write letters to Danny Davis, please let me come wrestle. And I got into the backyard wrestling, and there was a pro-am wrestler back then, many, many moons ago. And then at some point, I was a football player. I had to focus on that, had to get away from wrestling, went to school, went to college, yada, yada, yada. Wanted to become a therapist, wanted to help people, finish those degrees. Got my master's in social work. And then at some point, I went to a wrestling show. A buddy of mine just was like, hey, let's go watch this wrestling show. Sabu's there, and Tommy Dreamer's going to be there. Let's go check it out. So I did. And that's when I ran into Jose and Shane Mercer, who are now two of my best friends in the wrestling industry now. But I didn't at the time. I was like, those guys watching them like really got me hooked into, man, I used to do this as a teenager, and I think I could probably still do this again. So I made the decision. I talked to a buddy of mine from college, Frank the Tank, and he's like, yeah, I'll do this. So if you want to get back into it, let's do it. So I started, training, got back into it, had the opportunity, and I decided I wanted to really get even better at it. So I went to OVW. So at that point, I was, I guess, in my late 20s when I got back into it. I've been doing it now for be 9 years in February, I believe, is how long I've been doing it recently. Now, I started as a teenager 20 plus years ago. But yeah, so I guess that's kind of sort of how I got into it. But I always wanted to be a therapist to help people, because the idea of getting paid to talk, obviously I like to talk, I'm just talking here. But getting paid to do that and making people feel better, yeah, it's like a pretty easy job. But then also being able to be physical and get some of that aggression out, was also positive. So it just seemed like the best of both worlds, being able to live both those dreams, being able to be on TV and entertain people, but also being able to help people, with doors closed, one-on-one.
That is excellent. Well, let's wrap this up with one question, and this is more of a personal one.
Sure.
I've never really dove into this. Dove. We'll go with dove. I've never really dove into this with anybody, but you're right up that cusp. Like you said, the Attitude Era, and that's right when kayfabe broke.
Mm.
Which do you think was the better style to have for professional wrestling, full kayfabe or the way it is now?
Well, if we're completely honest, and not to throw a wrench in the question, I think that although kayfabe, it wasn't flaunted as much back then. I mean, people have always, since the 1920s, have known on some levels that professional wrestling was fake.
Right.
Al Snow tells this story all the time, and it's not that professional wrestling is fake, because trust me, I don't know if you can hear what my shoulder is doing right now.
Dang.
I mean, that's my good shoulder. This is the one with the torn rotator cuff and the torn labrum. Like, there's nothing fake about what it does to the body. Every time you get slammed in the ring, it's a 20-mile-per-hour impact from a car wreck is what that does to your body. So if somebody punches you or kicks you, it hurts. So there's nothing fake about it. The only thing that's fake about it is the outcome. But people have always, to some extent, known that wrestling was scripted to some extent. I mean, I was small kids, but I guess to answer your question, I think that the idea of suspending disbelief was a lot easier when people didn't necessarily know all of the behind the scenes, the dirt sheets, and who did this and who did that. And, well, I'm only looking for a 5-star match and that kind of stuff. I think it was when people didn't, like, before the internet was really popularized. I think back in the day, Attitude Era and pre-Attitude Era, people would come and just enjoy it for what it was. And they wouldn't have so many egos about the 5-star matches and the moves and the things that are happening and the relationships and the brother, let me shake your hand after this match. And we just had a blood and guts, knock each other's teeth out. Now we're best friends on the internet type of crap. I think that back then, when people put more effort into protecting it, I mean, hell, I wouldn't be allowed to be having this interview with you right now if, if this was, even 20, 30 years ago.
If you were a babyface, yes, but not if you were heel.
Well, sure, but I'd still only be able to have half of this interview, right?
Yeah,
because
that's true.
I couldn't be talking to you right now about kayfabe as a word. Like, what is kayfabe? I can't,
Yeah.
But that's the reality. But I do think that it was a lot easier for fans to suspend disbelief when it wasn't, their intelligence wasn't questioned as much, like, because it's constantly shoved down your throat that this is good guys, bad guys, they're actually friends behind the scene and all that stuff. So I guess back then, I mean, I guess there's some benefit now. I mean, I guess it's a little more challenging now to be a good pro wrestler because of that. But it also means that when you are doing a good job, you're that much more over, because it's like, despite the veil being pulled back, people still are paying money for you to be able to help them to suspend disbelief. Because even if they know what's real and what's not that real, they're still wanting to invest in you. Like nobody asks, is Arnold Schwarzenegger really a Terminator? Is he really half a machine? Like nobody cares about that. Like we still go to pay movies, you know. But I think wrestling, it was a lot easier when people weren't getting caught up in the extracurriculars of the real and the fake, and they were just focused on what's in front of them.
I think I'm of the same mind as you because back then, yeah, you were more focused on the story. You were more focused on the characters that were in the ring, as opposed to, oh wait, did you just see what Billy Gunn did over here at the bar? You know, and
Right, right,
it,
right.
I love suspension of disbelief because I live my life in film,
Hmm.
so I love that time to be able to do that, and that's what I really enjoyed about growing up during those eras. You know,
Absolutely.
but I do agree with you 100%. You mentioned now, if you get over now, it's you've earned it because yeah,
Absolutely.
and 100%.
And I think I was a bigger fan of WCW because of the NWO and because of the realism, because it was like, okay, even though I'm pretty sure that it's fake, I don't know. These guys seem kind of legit. It seemed kind of real. It could be, I don't know. I'm not really sure. So I think, you know, take it for what it is. There's benefits to both. But I love being able to believe in it and not have to, well, you know, I'm pretty sure that Undertaker isn't really a zombie, and I don't think that Kane actually burned down and murdered his entire family. And I don't think, you know, but regardless, Undertaker is one of the most over guys in the history of wrestling,
Yeah.
despite having an absurd storyline because he lived the gimmick and he wasn't on social media up until recently talking about all the stuff in the veil of kayfabe and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and see, that's why I think the breaking of the kayfabe was nice because it allowed for character changes like that. Because with before, there was no way you could have gone from the Undertaker to the American Badass because people would be going, "Wait a minute,"
Hang
you
on,
know.
yeah.
But
And for that matter, there would be no way that I could be a therapist helping people and telling them to not do bad things and then going and being Big Zo and beating the crap out of people. And I have to sometimes say, hey, you know, what you see me on doing on TV, do as I say and not as I do. You know, so I wouldn't be able to live this dual life of these two dreams of being able to do that if it wasn't for kayfabe being broken a bit.
oh man. Well, Kawan, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this because I think this is one of the best books that have been released, definitely in the near, like in the recent times,
Yeah.
especially because of COVID. So I
Yes. I
commend you
appreciate
for
you,
putting
brother.
this out. And writing a book is no small undertaking either. Like
Mm.
it's a lot of dedication. I've been working on a book for about 10 years and I think I've got 100 pages. So hats off to you, sir.
I appreciate it. I think that it's just one bite at a time, man. One word at a time, one sentence at a time, one paragraph at a time, one page at a time. You just do it when you can. Like I did Google Docs is how I did it. Sometimes I'd be in the middle of the night, I have an idea, I start typing it on my phone, or I'd be at work and I during my lunch break, I'd email myself an idea, or you know, I'd be whenever the urge strikes you, you just gotta write, and don't stop writing until you're done writing.
And it's handy because you can get to that from anywhere,
Absolutely.
which is
Yeah.
the nice thing. I did everything paper pen. You know,
Oh
I'm an
man.
old school. So I used Google Docs because I could put on a headset and read it into the computer.
Yeah, yeah,
Then I
that's
just
fair.
did tweaking. But yeah, I commend you for this. And everybody go out there and grab Cooking Up Counseling. You said it's on Amazon, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's on Amazon. Amazon.com/author slash Cowann. You can see how my name is spelled Cowann. It looks like Cowann, but I promise it's Cowann. My parents just misspelled it or something. I don't know. But if you just type in cooking up counseling or you type in Cowann, which there's not too many Cowanns on Amazon, it's super easy to find. But cooking up counseling, and you can find my journals also. So you have the opportunity to get all those things.
And if you're looking at it's in the chat below,
Uh-huh.
amazon.com/author/Kawan. So it's down below the video you're watching right now. Just copy that out, drop it in Amazon, and you'll see this.
Sure. And if you haven't seen me wrestle, then please check me out on OVW. We're all over the place now. It's on Fight TV Network, or if you're local in Louisville, WBNA 21, all kinds of U2 America, Fox Sports. I can't even name all of the several channels that we're on now, but Google it, YouTube it, Big Zo, just ZO. OVW, the place where John Cena, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, Batista all cut their teeth, and we could Shelton Benjamin. The list goes on and on and on. We're still doing great things. We're one of the longest running episodic wrestling shows. Actually, we are the longest running, other than Raw and SmackDown, right? Actually, longer than SmackDown. So only Raw is the ones that's beating us in that regard. And we're running live now, live 2 hour shows. So,
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so it's definitely an opportunity to learn how to wrestle.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cowann. And everybody out there, like I said, run out, grab this book, enjoy the read. We'll see everybody later.
All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you. Appreciate you, Rob.
Hey, my pleasure.